What's going on, everyone? It's Ryan, and we're here today with the AL Central podcast, season preview podcast. This is episode number 5, and I'm joined today by Ian. Say what's up, Ian.
What's up, guys?
So I guess I'll let you go first. I think I went first last time, right?
I have no
I'm
idea,
not quite sure.
but I'll go
You
first
start.
because
All right.
I like this team. Spilled water. The Chicago White Sox, who went 63 and 99 last year, they finished fifth in the AL Central. They had a pretty, I mean, I wouldn't call it a huge offseason, but it was a pretty big offseason in terms of adding young talent. They ended up signing Jose Abreu to a big 6-year, $68 million contract. He is a Cuban defector. He's a first baseman, and he has a ton of power. They also signed Scott Downs to a one-year contract along with Ronald Belisario. They re-signed Paul Konerko to a one-year, $2.5 million contract. And they also acquired Matt Davidson and Adam Eaton. I believe they acquired those guys in separate trades. And they also ended up trading Addison Reed in the Matt Davidson trade. So they got two young players from the Diamondbacks, and they gave up their former closer, Addison Reed. And they also recently re-signed Jose Quintana to a 5-year, $26 million contract. So it was a pretty eventful offseason in terms of adding some young talent, locking up some young talent. But Ryan, what do you think about this team?
Well, I think that it was definitely a pretty decent offseason. Obviously, getting Jose Abreu, who has a ton of power, hasn't really showed yet this spring. He only has 2 home runs, and he's hitting, I think, 295. So we'll have to see how he adjusts to the MLB. And obviously, I guess from what it looks like, from what Ian and I saw, I guess the DH is going to be kind of a platoon between Paul Konerko and Adam Dunn. So, I mean, it's really just kind of like an older team on the DH side. Obviously, Konerko has been there for a while, like, since like '99. Um, Also, getting Adam Eaton is pretty interesting because he's young and he's only played 2 seasons so far, and he's hit pretty well when he was healthy. But I think last year he missed a ton of time with a bunch of injuries. So I guess they're kind of just banking on him, see if he can continue that when he's healthy. And I definitely like just some of the moves that they made to get younger. They're definitely trying to build for the future, which obviously is what this plan for this team is to do for the next few years, is to rebuild. Obviously, they have a lot of good pieces in place with Jose Abreu if he can emerge, and Chris Sale, who's just turned a couple of pretty nasty seasons, past 2 seasons. So probably one of my favorite pitchers to watch in baseball. I love how he pitches. So yeah, they definitely have some interesting young pieces on this team. It'll be interesting to see how they move forward with it.
Yeah, I liked the moves to get Matt Davidson and Adam Eaton. It's not a team with a very strong farm system. So I think getting good solid young players from other teams is always a good idea. Adam Eaton, like you said, was hurt last year. He only played in 66 games. He's only played in 88 career games, but he's looked pretty decent in that span. He's only at 254, but he has a 332 OBP, which is a little bit low for a guy that you might plug in at the top of your order. But he's also only 25 years old, so that's something. A better plate discipline is always something that gets developed a little bit later than things just like ability to hit for contact and stuff like that. So um, I liked the trade getting him. I believe that was the Hector Santiago trade when they lost Santiago. I was a little bit surprised to see them move Santiago, but I guess they don't have too much faith in them, and I think they like Quintana, obviously because they just re-signed him. So him and Sale are players that they expect to be at the top half of the rotation for the next 5 years at least. And then I liked them trading Addison Reed for Matt Davidson. I forget what the exact old saying is, but it's something along the lines of like the worst thing you can have on a bad team is a good closer. He's pretty much useless at that point, and Addison Reed is kind of the exception to that because a lot of the time that rule applies because a closer is usually a veteran. It's very uncommon to see closers under the age of 25 outside of the likes of like Craig Kimbrell and Addison Reed, to name a couple. But they did trade Addison Reed and got a good young third baseman in Matt Davidson, who's a power hitter. He ended up hitting in 31 games last year, only 237, but he had 3 home runs and 76 at bats and had a 768 slugging percentage. So it wasn't too shabby. And he's only 23 years old. He's likely going to be their third baseman for the future. He's also hitting 308 this spring, so that's very promising. Only 2 home runs, but in 39 at bats, that's not too shabby. So I liked their moves to get young talent. I think the place they're going to have to address in the future is with their pitching staff. They have Quintana and they have Chris Sale, but past that they don't have too much. I'm not sure who they're going to look to in their farm system. I don't know too much about it because it's not a very strong one. And I think that's where they're really going to have to shore things up in the future. But other than that, I was pretty impressed with what their front
Yeah.
office did. And I like the young talent on this team moving forward. I mean, you look at their depth chart. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess Alexi Ramirez is 32 now. He's not the young shortstop that he was 5 or 6 years ago. But you look at guys around the diamond like Matt Davidson, like Adam Eaton, like Dion Viciedo, and even though he's 29, Alejandro De Aza is a guy who's quietly been a 2020 guy for them the last couple of years or close to it. So they have some solid players on their team at this point. I kind of like how they've built their core, and the guy I haven't even touched on is Avisail Garcia, who I absolutely love. But I think they have a good young core in the making here, and I was just very satisfied with how they went about or how they went about their offseason. I think it's a team that's going to be strong moving forward. And
all right, so we're gonna go up.
Sorry.
All right.
Go for it.
All right, we're gonna go into the off-season grades. So I'm gonna go first. I gave them a C plus. I mean, obviously they didn't make some big moves, but they made the right moves to help this club in the future. I really like the Jose Abreu signing and also getting Adam Eaton and Matt Davidson and seeing what those guys can do.
I gave them a B. Like I said, I was just I liked their aggressiveness going about getting young talent. I thought they did it the right way. They traded a couple of guys, so I guess they weren't high in Santiago, and obviously, like I said, Addison Reed, a closing pitcher on a bad team, a guy you always want to look to trade. And I also like getting guys like Scott Downs and Ronald Belisario. If those guys perform in the first half, that's definitely trade bait at the trade deadline this year. And then the Jose Abreu signing was big. For a team like the White Sox coming off of a last place season, to get a big name like that, I think that's big for your organization. So I give them a B. And we'll move on to the over-unders. I'll go first. The over-under of this team is a 74.5 this year. That would be a whole 11.5 win improvement. So this might be a stretch, but I'm going over on this team. Like I said, I like the young talent on this team. I kind of like where it is moving forward. I still think they have some solid players, like Alejandro De Aza, like Alexi Ramirez. Gordon Beckham was okay last year, and maybe Konerko and Dunn can combine to be productive out of that DH spot. I think pitching is going to be their issue once again. But I still like with this team moving forward. I even though it's a weak farm system, I think, I just think that getting the pieces that they did, it shows their aggressiveness that they're going to have in the future. And I just, like I said, I like some of these players on this team. That's why I think they're going to overachieve a little bit this year. So I'm going over.
Well, this team won 63 games last year. I doubt that they're really going to make an 11-game improvement. That's also considering that they didn't have who did they trade over the Red Sox? Peavy.
Yeah, Peavy.
Obviously, they had a half season from him, so that kind of adds in the win percentage, as well as trading a lot of their bullpen pieces that they're not going to have this year. I just think that the pitching is way too thin, and that this team just really isn't strong enough offensively to make an 11-game improvement. So I'm definitely taking this under on this one.
All right.
So,
and Ryan, do you want to move on to the next team?
Yep, we'll get to the Minnesota Twins, who were 66-96, which is 4th in the AL Central. Just recently, they outright advanced Worley, and if you remember, last year they got him from the Phillies in a really weird trade, and obviously he was their opening day starter last year. Had an ERA over 7 over the first month, and he's now gone in AAA. They made a lot of kind of depth move. They signed Ricky Nolasco for 4 years, $49 million with a 5th-year option. Signed Mike Pelfrey for 2 years, $11 million. Signed Phil Hughes for 3 years, $24 million. Also signed catcher Kurt Suzuki for a 1 year, $2.75 million. Traded away Ryan Doumit to the Atlanta Braves, and also this year, Joe Mauer is moving to first base full time, which I really like that move because obviously he's had a lot of problems recently with his injuries, and obviously he's a catcher, so that's a pretty tough spot to have full seasons, as a lot of catchers will probably attest, like Posey, Yadier Molina, who are often injured a little bit. So I definitely like these moves that they made with all these pitchers, though, and Nolasco's going to be the opening day starter. Pelfrey and Phil Hughes, they just add a lot of needed depth to this team, and last year they were last in the AL with a 5.26 ERA collectively as a staff. So obviously I think that'll be a pretty good improvement on that team. Also Miguel Sano, who was hopefully going to come up this year. He's a electrifying third baseman, just hits the crap out of the ball. This spring he had Tommy John surgery, and he was looking great last year, but that's going to derail that for the rest of the season. We'll have to wait till next year, where hopefully him and Byron Buxton will both debut. So I mean, obviously they have a lot of good prospects in that minor league system, full of some young guys. So what do you think about this team, Ian?
I was not a big fan of this team's offseason, and I'm not a huge fan of the young talent that they have currently on the team. It's a team with a pretty strong farm system, though, headed by the likes of Byron Buxton and Miguel Sano, as you mentioned. And I like the moves they made last offseason when they traded away Denard Span and Ben Revere. I thought that those were good moves for the future, and I still think that even though Vance Worley got outrighted, and I have no idea honestly how Trevor May's doing, but I still think it was the right move and the right idea. So I kind of liked their mindset in that sense, but I think this offseason they jumped the gun a little bit, signing a guy like Ricky Nolasco to almost a $50 million contract. Nolasco's a good, number 3 or 4 guy in your rotation, and I think I don't like it when rebuilding teams like this sign those type of guys to those type of contracts. I think you got to wait until you're kind of on the up and up to sign players to those type of contracts, especially when you're a team like the Twins who do not have a ton of money to work with. They have the big Mauer contract that they're going to be locked into for a while. He has a no trade clause and he's from Minnesota, so I don't think he's going to be requesting a trade anytime soon. Also, Nolasco is a guy who before last season hadn't had an ERA under 4 since 2008. After that, in 09, 10, 11, and 12, he had ERAs of 5.06, 4.51, 4.67, and 4.48. And then he was only at 3.85 last season before getting traded, and then he caught fire at the end and had a really good stretch for the Dodgers. But I don't know if that's motivation partially or whatever it is, but he's certainly not going to be motivated in Minnesota if he's going to be playing on a crap team for the next couple of years. But, if some of their young farm system does come up in the future with guys like Buxton and Sano, and if those guys fill out, and maybe Aaron Hicks can bounce back. Maybe Brian Dozier can, turn into something. Plouffe maybe too. I mean, they have some, decent pieces here. Obviously, they have Mauer, who I agree with you. I like moving him to first base. I think you can find a catcher later on down the road. It's good to preserve that guy when you're 3 or 4 years away from really competing. You want a guy like Mauer to be still hitting 324 and slugging, 476 3 or 4 years down the road. And I think the best way to do that is to move him at a position where he's gonna, have less stress on his knees, and I think he'll last a little bit longer in his prime. So I think that was the right move, and it's something they've been moving towards for the last couple of years. So I agreed with it. And but other than that, I wasn't a huge fan of their offseason, and I'm curious to see how they act in future offseasons and future trade deadlines moving forward. Do you have any other thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say I do kind of like those signings of Nolasco, Pelfrey, and Hughes, just because they re-signed Mike Pelfrey. But I just think that if these guys can perform well enough for half this season, they can definitely become trade bait for them, and just attempt to land some more prospects. Obviously, they can also trade Josh Willingham if he can be healthy this whole season. So I definitely like the direction that this club is going in. I think it's that they're definitely in the right path, and they're definitely going to get back into contention in a few years. Obviously, Buxton and Sano have all been great, and if they can get some more talent from them, then this team will be pretty much set for the next few years. So I guess we'll get in the off-season grades now. I'll go first. I gave them a B-. I definitely like those signings. Wasn't too special, but just to make this team more competitive from that standpoint, they definitely did make themselves more competitive, and we'll see how they handle some of these signings throughout the season.
I give them a D, and I guess it's just the difference in our philosophy, so to say, for off season for teams like this. I give them a D because I just I don't like it when teams go out and make big signings like Phil Hughes and Ricky Nolasco. And Phil Hughes is a guy who he's been terrible, honestly, since he became a starter. I don't see the need to give a guy like that $24 million. Now, I understand that you have a pretty thin starting rotation, and maybe you do need guys like that. So I don't hate that move as much as I guess hate is a strong word, but I don't dislike that move as much as I dislike the Nolasco move, because I guess you do need guys like Phil Hughes when you have such a weak and young starting rotation, like the Twins do. But I don't know. It was an off season that didn't impress me, and it makes me feel like maybe they're not being patient like I've been impressed with other teams like the Astros or like other teams that we've mentioned in previous podcasts. So I just wasn't a big fan of it, and I gave them a D.
All right, so the over-under this team is 70.5, and I'll go first. I'm actually taking the over on this one. I think that those signings are definitely going to bring down that ERA, and that'll probably give them a little bit boost in the win percentage. So 4-game improvement, I'll definitely take that over on that any day.
I'm going under. I just don't think Nolasco and Hughes and Pelfrey and Suzuki and all those guys, I don't think they're going to be impactful enough to make this team that much better. There's not enough young talent on this team to make me think that some of those young guys are going to take strides this year and become more impactful players. So I'm going under. And I think that does it for the Twins. So we'll move on to, as we get towards kind of the meat of this division, move on to the Kansas City Royals as kind of the last three teams in this are the three teams that you can realistically think might make the playoffs this year. The Royals are a team that a lot of people are high on this year. They're coming off of an 86-76 season. I believe it was their first winning season since like 2003. They finished third in the AL Central. Their biggest losses this offseason were Irvin Santana and Luke Hochevar. Now Hochevar, or I can't pronounce that name, he's still on the team, but he did go down with Tommy John surgery. He ended up turning into a pretty productive reliever for them last year, so they will certainly miss him. And Irvin Santana had a great year for them last year. He ended up with like a 3.18 ERA. He was right there in the rotation behind James Shields. So they will certainly miss Santana. But I was a huge fan of what these guys did in the offseason. They got Norichika Aoki for Will Smith, which I think was I'm not going to call it a steal, but it was a pretty good trade. It's hard to steal kind of a role player like Norichika Aoki or Norichi Aoki. But I think they got him for pretty cheap, and I liked that move a lot. They needed the right fielder. They tried Justin Maxwell at the end last year as a platoon. It did not work out, so they moved forward with Aoki. I love that move. And then getting Irvin Santana and Jason Vargas for $31 million and $32 million respectively were bargains compared to the rest of the market. Infante, specifically second base is a weak position. It's not a deep position in Major League Baseball. And they were like last in production from second base last season. Infante's certainly going to be an upgrade, even if he doesn't hit 318 last year. Infante is historically like a 280-ish hitter. Even if he does that, that's still a good contract. You get a solid veteran presence. He's only 32 years old. He's a career 279 hitter and a career 721 OPS, but he plays a solid defense. And I think that might look like one of the better bargains in baseball. And then I think the Jason Vargas signing was huge too. Vargas is a guy that has gone under the radar really the last couple of years, but has quietly put up pretty solid numbers. He had a 4.02 last year, and I'm pulling up his stats right now, but I think he had a 3.79 a couple years ago. He had a 3.85, he had a 4.25 the year before that, and a 3.78 in 2010. He's quietly, and he's put up over 200 innings in two of those seasons and 192 and 2/3 in the other. And one of the others. So he's quietly been durable, consistent, and solid, and he can be a middle of the rotation type of guy. A middle to back off. He's probably a 4 on a good team. I don't know if you'd want him making a playoff start, so to say. But I think you can get away with him doing that. I think he could be a good number 3 or 4. And considering what the market was for guys like Nolasco, Garza, Santana, and I know that all those guys are better than Vargas, but you look at kind of the gap between those guys and Vargas is not that big. And considering how much less Vargas went for, I think that was a really, really good signing. I loved the value that they got for Jason Vargas. And I've been a Jason Vargas fan for a couple of years now. I think he's one of the more under the radar and underrated players in baseball. But other than that, they returned a group of really good young talent with Eric Osmer, Alex Gordon, Lorenzo Kane if he can stay healthy this year, Mike Moustakas, Billy Butler, a lot of guys hitting their prime. But Ryan, what do you think about this team? Do you think they can finally make the playoffs for the first time since 1986 or something?
I definitely think they can. I don't know if they will in this division or just the American League in general, but I just think that this team really needs to get production from that core 3 of Hosmer, Moustakas, who hit. I'm gonna check those stats real quick. He hit 233 last year. So these guys, all 3 of these guys, all need to kind of carry this team this year, I think. And I really think that they can make the playoffs. It just depends on this pitching. Obviously, losing Irvin Santana, who last year was kind of an outlier for him. He's normally been a little bit worse than that. So obviously losing him might be a little bit big to this team. I think the Vargas signing is going to help that. Also, Yordano Ventura, he's looked great this spring, and it's going to be interesting to see just this rotation this year. It's really kind of seems unproven. James Shields, this might be his last year with the club. They're not going to extend him, so he's going to be hitting the free agent market after this offseason, so it's going to be interesting to see if they can retain him after this season. And obviously, this is a contract year for him, so he's probably going to be pitching as good as he can, see how much he can get in free agency. So far this spring, Royals look pretty good. I think all those players that I mentioned, they're hitting about 300 or a little bit above, a little bit below. Jason Maxwell hitting 351 this spring, so kind of interesting to note that. And pitching staff has looked pretty decent. Vargas, who you mentioned earlier, always has those ERAs at about 4. Right now in 21 innings pitched, he's at a 2.14, and Shields is at 2.61 and 20 and 2/3. And finally, Ventura is at a 1.77 in 20 1/3. So, obviously, these guys are actually having a pretty good spring. It's going to be interesting to see if they can carry that into the regular season. Hopefully, get it to a hot start. And yeah, I definitely don't see why they wouldn't make the playoffs this year. And if they don't, I think that'll be a disaster. I think they really should.
Yeah. Before we get into the offseason grades, I have a couple more thoughts. You wrote down in the Google Doc, it feels like a make or break year. I totally agree with that. I think it is finally time for the Royals to, move on from the. It's always the talk of, oh well, they have a great farm system and they're coming. It's going to be coming up in the next couple of years. And I remember in like 2009, they had a big article in ESPN the magazine about this, stacked farm system that they had after 10 years of suckage. And all those guys are finally starting to come up, and they definitely jumped the gun a little bit, trading Will Myers for James Shields. But looking back on it, considering what Shields did for them last year and how, how the team turned it around last year seemingly, and got a whole lot better in how they're positioning themselves for a playoff run this year. I don't think you can gripe at that trade too much, even though you did give up Will Myers. Considering where the team is right now, I think it's hard to look back at that and say it was a quote-unquote bad trade. But this Shields' contract year, and I think that not only with a guy like him who knows if he's going to re-sign, who knows if the Royals can afford to re-sign him, especially if he hits the open market, he's going to get big bucks. He's going to get a lot more. He's probably, I would say maybe even more than what Anibal Sanchez got a couple off seasons ago. I think he got 5 for $75 million. Shields might even get more than that.
I think he'll get 20 million at least.
Yeah, I mean he might. The market can change, but I think a guy like Moustakas, it's a make or break year for him. He's had a couple years now, and I think it's finally time to, he's killing in spring training right now. He's like a 14.28 OPS as of the date we're recording this. But I think, if he has another bad year, it's his age 25 season. I don't know how much longer you can hold out hope for this guy if he has another bad year again. A guy like Lorenzo Cain is a guy that I've been high on in the past, and, another guy where it's like, okay, if you're going to stay healthy this year, this is, you have to perform or else it's going to be too late. And even for a guy like Wade Davis too, he's 28 now. It's time to, move on from the prospect potential phase and finally fill out. So it's a make or break year for a couple guys individually, and I think that's going to make it a big year for the team. I think 2014 was what they were aiming for when they traded for James Shields, and I think that it's big, and I think it's going to be on their pitching. I think they're going to get enough offense this year, especially if Osmer continues to get better, if Butler continues to hit with a 787 OPS, if Alex Gordon, he's going to be in the middle of the lineup this year, so he's probably going to be driving in a ton more runs. And Salvador Perez can continue to give them production behind the plate. I think it's going to be on their pitching. They'll miss Santana. I think it's going to be on Ventura, Vargas, or Guthrie, one of those guys to step up and be the number 2 on this team. I don't know who it's going to be, but I think it's going to be on those guys if they want to perform this year. But if you don't have any other final thoughts, you can move on to the offseason grades.
Yeah, we'll get in the offseason grades. So I'm giving this a team. I'm not really set yet. I'm going to give them a B, but depending on how these new acquisitions perform this year, I'll give them a B+. But I know I really probably shouldn't do that. But yeah, it just depends on how. Obviously, Infante was a huge signing for them. They had absolutely no production from that second base spot last year, and he's instantly going to solve that. Like you said, even if he hits back to like his 280 average, it's still going to be a definite improvement for this team. And then I'm also interested to see how Aoki does over in right field. He's had some past 2 years hitting about 287, and if he can continue that for this team and everyone else can perform, it'll be a really nice acquisition from this offseason.
I'm going with the B+. I love the way they approached it. They had needs last year at right field, second base, and then after Santana, they needed another pitcher. They went after guys at those positions, and they got them for pretty cheap. They got them for good value. The only reason they don't get an A- or an A is because, they didn't get a whole lot better, I don't think. They didn't get that one player that's going to come in and really change things for them. But I think the way they approached it was the right way, and I love what they did this offseason, so I gave them a B+.
All right, and the over-under this team is at 82, and I'll let you go first in this one.
Yeah, I'm going over. They won 86 games last year. They would have to get, they would have to lose 4 more games they did last year to get 82 wins. The only place I see this team at a downgrade is with their starting pitching because they lose Santana, but I think they have a strong bullpen that can help that out, and I think their offense, just with the young players, is going to get better enough to, kind of cancel that out, so to say, especially with the additions of Infante and Aoki. So I don't see this team getting worse. I think this is one of the easier overs for me personally.
Oh, yeah, I definitely agree. I'm going way over on this team. I just think that with this spring that they've been having so far. Obviously, they've been really hot this spring, despite their record. But a lot of their key players that they're going to have this year have looked really good. I think that this over under is just that low because they lost Irvin Santana, but obviously getting Omar Infante, that's going to boost this team a lot, and that'll really make this offense probably click this year. So it'll be a really fun team to watch. I don't think they'll be one of the more interesting teams this in this season. So yeah, I'm taking that over. And so we're gonna get
Yeah,
into
Ryan,
the
go ahead. Take it away with your favorite team.
All right, so here's the Cleveland Indians, 92 and 70, second in the AL Central last year. Obviously, last season they had a big offseason with that Nick Swisher and Michael Bourne signings, but this one was not as exciting. So first off, they lost Ubaldo Jimenez, which we'll talk about that in a little bit. Moved Carlos Santana over third base, which is pretty good because, quite honestly, third base has been one of our worst spots of the past 5 years. Signed David Murphy for 2 years, $12 million with the club option for a third. Obviously, David Murphy before last season, he was hitting really well, but he had a terrible season. I think he hit like 230 last year, something like that, 220. So, and another interesting little thing that they did was signing David Cooper, who's an interesting player. He had a life-threatening injury back in 2013, and then he began his comeback attempt with the Indians. And last year in AAA, he hit 314 in 55 plate appearances. So I don't know. This guy could definitely be good. I think he's going to be on the bench this year. So it's going to be interesting to see if he can provide some help. Obviously, there's really no risk of this guy. You can just cut him if he sucks. But we'll talk about that maybe in a little bit. Traded Drew Stubbs for Josh Alman from the Rockies. Signed John Axford for our closing spot for 1 year. Extended Brantley. I love this deal. 4 years, $25 million with an $11 million option for a fifth. And then, or I don't know why I put Brantley right there. Bourne is having issues with his hamstring. I know last November he had surgery on his hamstring and he just got put on the DL, I think today. So it's going to be interesting. Obviously, he's one of those older aging guys who has a lot of speed, and now his legs seem like they're kind of starting to deteriorate. So that's kind of an issue. So we're definitely going to see how he does. But yeah, I'll let you talk about this team first.
All right. The Indians won 92 games last year, obviously, and I think they overachieved a little bit. They beat up on bad teams a lot. I remember being a Red Sox fan, a lot of the talk was who do you want to face in the ALDS, the Rays, the Indians, or the Rangers, or whatever. And a lot of people kept bringing up the Indians because I think they had some crazy record against the below 500 teams, and then were like, I don't know, 20 games below 500 against winning record teams or something like that. It was something crazy like that. And I don't know if that's sustainable. I don't know if you can keep beating up on bad teams like that. I think that catches up to you eventually. So I think in that sense this team could regress. And I think that at the same time, I still think they're a couple moves away from being real contenders, real World Series contenders. And they certainly didn't make those moves this offseason, which that's not a big deal. You don't have to rush into that. I don't think you have to do that immediately. I think you can wait in that sense. They still have some young pieces to come up, like Francisco Lindor. And they're still in Asdrubal Cabrera trade at some point in there. That's likely going to happen. So I think it was okay to wait. I didn't mind them losing Ubaldo Jimenez. Getting a pick out of him and letting him sign for $50 million with the Orioles was fine. Before his really good second half last year, he had a 5.40 ERA in 2012 and a 5.10 in 2011. Or at least with Cleveland in 2011 in the second half. So I was fine letting him go. He hadn't really been the same since 2010, his almost Cy Young season. Before that, season. And I don't really know. I don't think he's worth $50 million, and I think they'll be fine without him. They also lost Scott Kazmir, who I don't think is going to reproduce his 4.04 ERA season last year. But at the same time, they're going to lose a pitcher who was pretty productive from last year. However, they do retain Masterson, who I think they should re-sign. I think, especially if he has another good year this year, they got to look to re-sign him. They have Corey Kluber, Zach McAllister returning. They also have Danny Salazar, who was good in the second half last year. And we'll see if Trevor Bauer maybe comes up. I was a little bit, it was interesting to see them not re-sign Joe Smith, who had a pretty productive year last year, 2.29 ERA. He's 29 years old. Relievers always get shuffled around like that, but I think when you have a guy like that who's been solid before, and proved it again last year, you can be a good reliever, good setup man. I think it's curious to let a guy go like that. They did bring in John Axford, who had a really good 2011 with the Brewers, hadn't been the same since, then had a really good 13 final games with the Cardinals last year. So we'll see if he can keep that up. I thought the Josh Allen trade, the Drew Stubbs for Josh Allen trade was kind of a nothing trade. I liked the Brantley extension, and I like the David Murphy signing too. I think Murphy's guy can bounce back this year. He had a down year last year, but he's a career 275 hitter. So if you get a guy like that on a $12 million contract for 2 years, I think that's a pretty good bargain. So I kind of liked some of the moves in a small scale, but I think they need to think a little bit bigger in the future. However, I was fine with them kind of thinking small a little bit in this offseason. But Ryan, what do you think about this team?
I definitely hated that they didn't go out and get some pitching. I mean, obviously last year one of the biggest issues that everyone was concerned about this team was the pitching, and somehow Francona and this pitching, just all these coaches, they got a ton out of this pitching staff. I know they threw like the most shutouts or the most complete games in the MLB last year. Obviously, Justin Masterson really anchored the squad, and yeah, this win percentage on this team from last year was definitely inflated. I know they went on that 10-game win streak at the end of the season to make that run in the playoffs, and they just beat on so many bad teams. I mean, they swept the Astros, swept the White Sox twice, they swept the Twins, and those are all series that were back to back to back to back. So they definitely got really lucky in having that schedule last year, and I'm pretty sure they still have a really easy schedule this year. So I mean, potentially, if they can continue to just beat up on these bad teams, they can definitely. I don't see why they wouldn't be able to get back to maybe 90 wins or something. I mean, obviously, Francona is a great manager. He knows how to get the most out of these players. So, but yeah, I'm just really disappointed that they didn't try to go after Matt Garza or maybe even Josh Johnson, just because. I mean, what do you have to lose? Carlos Carrasco is going to be our fifth starter. I mean, I'd rather push him out. Carlos Carrasco is just, he's just. I hate watching him pitch. He's really annoying. So, also the David Murphy signing, that was a good signing. Now that Bourne is out, if he's out, we'd have Rayburn playing right field, and obviously he had a good season last year. But I mean, I don't see why they like him so much. And we also have Mike No Range Aviles.
Yes, Mike No Range Aviles.
Oh my god! But
My
yeah,
favorite.
this bullpen also this year is just going to be pretty interesting. They obviously losing Joe Smith in this offseason is going to hurt them a little bit. He had like a 2.28 ERA last year. He was really one of our more consistent guys in the bullpen. Bastano really had a bad year last year. Axford being in that closing spot is really it's gonna make me uncomfortable watching him pitch in the ninth inning. And one more thing I want to touch on is Dribble Cabrera. I think if we can find any type of trade value out of this guy, I would love to if he's doing poorly this year. Last year he had 242, but normally he hits around that 270 range. In 2010 through 2012, he hit over 270, hit between 270 and 276 each of those years. So I really wish that him and Swisher can somehow get back to that this year. I would love to see that. That would really make this offense go just a lot more. But it's going to be really interesting with this team this year.
All right, and without further ado, we'll move on to the offseason grades. I'll go first. Actually, why don't you go first? Because you have a bit of a harsh grade on them. I like to hear you go first.
I gave him a D+. I was really disappointed because last season they really set this mentality in Cleveland that we're going to be the team that wants to be that consistent playoff team, and they really did. With bringing in Swisher and Bourne, it really gave us this there's actually hope. These guys are actually doing something. And this offseason, they could have maybe got Irvin Santana. I don't know if they were ever really trying to get him. But if they could have at least tried to put their name out there, I can't talk tonight again.
Every night.
I know. I'm sorry. But yeah, I would have liked to see them try to get either him, Josh Johnson, Garza. I mean, I would have loved to see Garza on this team so badly. That was one of the things I was looking forward to this offseason. Or just helping out that bullpen. Joaquin Benoit, they were bidding between the Padres and the Indians, and he ended up going to the Padres. I really wish they could have tried to get him or Jose Virus at least. I mean, just anyone, maybe even Fernando Rodney. I just really felt like this team needed to try to get a lot better this offseason. They didn't. And just these contract negotiations that have been going on with Justin Masterson have really angered me because he told them, I'm taking less money to stay with this club, and they still don't want to pay him that. I mean, why wouldn't you want to pay this guy who's been pretty solid and he's finally getting his stuff together? He's in his prime right now. Why don't you just sign him for the next 4 or 5 years? But they're just being really stubborn. Now we're going to have to wait till the end of the season where he's going to hit free agency, and I really think that someone's going to give him a huge offer and he's going to end up leaving, and that's just going to leave this pitching staff in kind of a bind.
Yeah, I gave them a B-. Like I said, they kind of thought small scale, and that was fine. I agree. They should have gone after Garza. I think because they got the compensation pick for Ubaldo, I think they should have gone after Garza. Out of all the guys that got the kind of the 4-year, $50 million ish contracts, I thought Garza was the smartest investment. He's just been the most consistent over his career. Never really outstanding, but I think he could have helped the Indians out, considering they do have maybe some depth issues with the rotation. But and I agree. I think they should lock up Masterson. I mean, he's gotten better recently, and he's only had before last year he had ERAs. He had a 3.21 in 2011, but he had a 4.93 in 2012. A little bit of inconsistency there. I think maybe they're holding on one more consistent year out of him, one more sub 4 ERA out of him. But I think if you can get him for the right price, he's a good pitcher. Even though his mechanics are kind of wacky. But also one thing we forgot to mention: Carlos Santana moving to third base. That's gonna put Yan Gomes behind the plate full time.
Love Yan Gomes.
Yeah, Yan Gomes, good year last year, 826 OPS, and I didn't watch him play too much, but every Cleveland Indian fan I follow on Twitter raves about his defense. So
yeah,
pretty good player in that sense.
Santana.
Yeah, well, I'm sure. So it was okay off season. I gave him a B minus. It was solid, nothing special, I don't think. And to move on to the over under. Their over under this year is 82, which is a whole 10-win decrease from last year. I don't see this team being that much worse. They lost Ubaldo, but I think I like some of the pieces they picked up, and I don't see them getting that much worse. I think Francona's a good manager. I think it's going to be hard for this team to win less than 83 games, so I'm going to go with the over here.
Yeah, I'm taking the over on this one at 82 games. I don't see a 10-win decrease from this team. Obviously, Francona, he just seems to get the most out of these clubs. And I just think that the weak schedule is really going to help them out. And I think this offense is set for a pretty good year. Hopefully, we got a ton of depth in that outfield. So it's going to be hopefully a good season. Hopefully, we can finally beat the Tigers. But I just hope they can make the playoffs again.
All right, and we'll move on to the final team for this division, the team that made the ALCS last year. The Detroit Tigers, who went 93-69 and finished first in the AL Central. They had a pretty big offseason. Their biggest, they had two really big moves. They traded Prince Fielder and cash considerations to the Texas Rangers for Ian Kinsler. Because they lost Omar Infante, Kinsler will fill in that second base hole. Cabrera is going to move back to first, and third base is open this year, but I think Nick Castellanos has had a pretty good spring, and it looks like he's going to win the job at spring training. They also had another big move. They traded Doug Fister to the Nationals for Steve Lombardozzi, Robbie Ray, and Ian Kroll. And then just today being Monday, they flipped Steve Lombardozzi for Alex Gonzalez. Gonzalez from the Baltimore Orioles. Pretty small scale move there. They also signed Joe Nathan to a 2-year, $20 million contract. They lost Johnny Peralta to the Cardinals. Jose Iglesias was going to take over as the full-time shortstop this year, but he is likely out for the year now with stress fractures in his shins. So that is one of the reasons they traded for Gonzalez, and that could be a spot they look to upgrade as we move towards the deadline. They signed Rajai Davis to a 2-year, $10 million contract. Good platoon player. He's likely going to platoon out in left field with Andy Dirks. I like that move a lot. And they signed Jabba Chamberlain, which was weird. They have a weak bullpen. It was one of their big downfalls last year. But I don't think signing Jabba Chamberlain is going to be the right answer there. They also lost Bruce Rondon to Tommy John surgery earlier in the year. They've had a lot of injuries this spring. Iglesias, Rondon, Dirks is out for 12 weeks. So a bit of a banged up team moving forward. I think Anibal Sanchez has had some shoulder problems too, which is not good for a guy that I think has had Tommy John in the past and has also had labrum surgery. So some bad signs in terms of injuries for this team. But Ryan, what do you think about the Tigers this year?
Well, I think that they're really going to be hoping on those that rotation this year is going to help them out a lot. Obviously, losing Prince Fielder, I mean, he did have a down year last year, but I mean, he still provided a lot of protection for Miggy in that lineup. So, was Victor Martinez, was he injured all of last year? Was that the year before?
That was the year before. He DH'd last year. He was really productive for them. He hit 300.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, obviously losing Prince Fielder, Victor Martinez is going to be their cleanup hitter this year, I believe. So, you do lose Fielder, but at least you do have a little bit more protection for Miggy still with having Victor Martinez on deck if you do try to walk him. So, obviously that tandem last year, if you tried to walk Miggy, I forget what Prince Fielder was hitting, but he was hitting something ridiculous. So, obviously having Nick Castellanos, that's going to be really interesting with this team because finally with Miggy moving back to first base, that opens up Castellanos' normal spot. So, hopefully he can provide some help for this team this year. Also getting Ian Kinsler, they're going to get a decent second baseman finally. Ian Kinsler, he's been kind of regressing a little bit. See if he can get back, yeah, if he can get back on track with Detroit, and then also losing Doug Fister. I really didn't like that trade at all, especially now they traded Lombardozzi for who'd they get again? Gonzalez.
Yeah, Alex
Right?
Gonzalez.
So, I mean, I really don't know why they did that. It really seems like it kind of affected their rotation depth. But Verlander, just a quick note: this in the spring, he's 20 innings pitched, or 13 and two thirds. I was looking at Scherzer for some reason. Thirds, and he has an ERA of 0. So maybe Verlander's going to get back to that Cy Young form that he was the year before when he was the MVP as well, or was that 2 years ago?
That was
I'm
he won MVP in 2011.
20. Okay,
Yeah.
but yeah, obviously he still had a good year in 2012
Yeah,
anyway.
it was
So
phenomenal.
Yeah, so if they can definitely get him and Scherzer going this year, once again, this team is going to be very fearsome, and they always seem like they can just beat up on this division. So
Yeah, I have a couple takes on this team. First things first, one of the things I liked about the Kinsler thing was you get another guy who's I think he's going to hit second for the team this year. Last year they had Torrey Hunter hitting second, and Torrey Hunter's not really a prototypical number 2 hitter. You want a number 2 hitter who can get on base, who can drive the ball to the gaps, and if I know not a lot of people, especially the advanced sabermetric community, they don't love bunting, but it's always something to have there at your number 2 hole if you're really looking to play small ball. And I think Kinsler fits the profile of a number 2 hitter pretty nicely. So I think you move him and Ajax in the 1-2, and then you move Hunter down to 5th. So you still have some pop in the middle of your lineup with Torrey Hunter, V-Mart, and Miggy. That's a pretty formidable 3-4-5. It's not they're not going to hit you 30 or 40 home runs each, but they're going to drive in runs for you if the top 2 get on base. So I like it from that sense. The biggest thing with this team that I didn't like was not necessarily the Fister trade, because I understand they wanted to move a pitcher so they could get Smiley in the rotation this year, and also it did save a little bit of money. It's a team that works on a budget, and they obviously committed $10 million a year to Joe Nathan, so that was a pretty big move. So they did need to cut a little bit of money somewhere, but I think, and I asked this question on Twitter the other day, and a lot of Tigers fans responded yes. I brought up the idea of, instead of trading Doug Fister to Washington for Steve Lombardozzi, Robbie Ray, and Ian Kroll, of trading Max Scherzer to Washington for Anthony Rendon. And maybe you don't pull off the Kinsler trade, maybe you get something else, fill another need with the Prince trade, and obviously Rendon looking like one of the. I mean, it doesn't even have to be Washington specifically, but the idea being Scherzer's free agent at the end of this year. They're in contract negotiations with him right now. He just turned out 6 years and $144 million. I don't care who you sign. If you sign a guy to that contract, it's not going to work out at the end of it. It is going to look like a bad contract by the end. It's just the way baseball works, and sometimes it's not about how the contract's going to look in 6 years. It's about how it looks right now, especially with a team like the Tigers, who kind of have not the biggest of windows right now with Cabrera and Verlander, kind of at, I wouldn't say at the tail end of their primes, but they're definitely in their primes, and I don't think they're going to be getting any better, so to say. So they have to capitalize on this window right now, and I think re-signing a guy like Scherzer is what they should do, even if the contract is going to look bad in 6 years. But I think if they're going to hit a schneid here with the Scherzer negotiation, in hindsight, I think they should have traded Scherzer, brought in a bigger haul, and then hauled out a rotation next year of Verlander, Sanchez, Fister, Smiley, and Porcello. And I think that's still a pretty good rotation. I have full confidence in Verlander bouncing back this year to his ace form. Fister, I think, is a top, 20, 25 pitcher in baseball. I think he's pretty underrated. I like Smiley a lot, and Sanchez, I don't think he's going to have a 250 ERA again this year, but he can be a good number 2 or number 3 on any team. So, I think even if you trade a guy like Scherzer, you could have still rolled out a formidable rotation. But it's just what I would have done. We'll see if it works out. Dave Dombrowski rarely loses a trade. He's one of the best GMs in baseball, so I wouldn't be too worried about it if I was Tigers fans. I think the biggest thing they have to worry about is the injuries this year. I think, they definitely have some holes now with Iglesias out for the year. Castellanos at third is unproven. Who knows? He could flop. And other than that, you have some up and down players like Alex Avila, Austin Jackson, some streaky guys there. So it's a team that I could see, returning to the ALCS again this year. It's a team that I could see, fighting for a wild card by the end of the year. I mean, it's a team that's almost underperformed in the regular season the last couple of years, but seemed to make good playoff runs. I mean, I thought they were pretty formidable in the ALCS last year, and a team that I thought definitely could make another World Series run if they came back with relatively the same group. And it's still the same core, but it's going to be a different team this year, and it's a thin team at this point. Not a lot of depth with their starting pitching, not a lot of depth with their lineup, and a couple more injuries, and this team could really derail quickly. But I still like this team. I like the core players, and I think it's a team that is going to be right back in the playoff hunt once again. So do you have any further thoughts?
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it's finally good for this team to have a consistent closer. Joe Nathan, obviously, they just have a ton of closing problems the past few years with obviously Papa Potato, and so yeah, I think Joe Nathan is really gonna help shore up this bullpen, and yeah, the bullpen actually looks pretty decent this year. So
Yeah, I still think their bullpen has room for improvement. Once you get past Nathan, it's a little bit weak, but I think the upgrade from Nathan over Benoit for an extra $5 million, smart move. I thought maybe they should have made an effort to get Benoit back as well, just to add to it. But at the same time, I think in a vacuum, getting Nathan over Benoit was the right move. Do you have anything else to say, or do you want to move on?
no, we'll go ahead to the offseason grades, and I'll go first. I gave them a C. I think they made the right moves, but they also obviously losing Benoit and sort of kind of losing the Prince Fielder trade kind of hurt that a little bit. But I definitely think that they tried to help out that bullpen a little bit, try to make a little bit of depth. But they also lost Johnny Peralta, and then also now that Peralta's gone and then Iglesias gets injured, you really don't have a very dependable shortstop unless you go out and sign Steven Drew, like I was kind of talking about on Twitter a couple days ago. But yeah, I gave them a C for this offseason.
I gave them a D plus. I was really unimpressed, I thought, and I know they have the budget to work with, and they got a big extension coming up with Miguel Cabrera, and they got an even bigger one potentially with Max Scherzer, and already a lot of money locked up with Verlander. So I didn't think I thought it was smart to maybe not go after the big name guys, but I think it's a thin team. I liked my idea of trading Scherzer instead of Fister, and I think a lot of Tigers fans agree with me based on Twitter the other day. I don't think they made an effort to or a good enough effort to improve their weakest part of the team last year in their bullpen. And I think that I just don't see a lot of ways how this team's going to be any better this year. And I think when you have a team that's that close to a World Series, maybe they don't have to be any better. If they are as good as they were last year, it likely could have won a World Series if things had swung their way a little bit. You look at the ALCS Game 2 when the Sox were down 5-1. If that game could have gone, that game could have swung in a lot of different ways. And you look at that game, if the Tigers win that game, they likely go to the World Series, and who knows how they would have done against St. Louis. So, it's a team that was right there last year and easily could have won the World Series. And it could be back there again, but I just don't see a way in which they're going to be a lot better than they were last year. And I think when you have a group like this, you have to strive to get better, not kind of coast, so to say. So I give them a D+. I didn't like how they went about things. And we'll go into the over-under. I'll go first. It is 90.5 this year, which would be only a 2.5 win decrease from last year. And I think with their injuries, and especially if the Sanchez shoulder thing becomes bigger than it is right now, that could really be deadly to their rotation. They do not have a lot of depth behind the 5 that they have in right now. So I'm going under. I think it's going to be a team in the 88-89 range, but I don't think they're going to quite get back to 91, 92, 93 this year.
I originally had my pick for the over, but I was checking out their starting pitching from last year, and it really looks like they just relied on those top 5 guys. So I'm looking at this, and everyone, Scherzer, Sanchez, Verlander, Fister, and Porcello, everyone pitched over 177. You lose Doug Fister, who gave you 208 innings last year, and if Sanchez really, obviously if he's having some health issues and can't go for a good chunk of the season, you're going to lose 182 innings pitched. Obviously, you plug in Drew Smiley for now, and that rotation is going to be pretty decent. But if any type of injury to any of these starters occurs, then this team is going to lose a lot of depth right there. So I'm going to take the under, and like you said, they'll be more in like the 80-89 range. I agree with that as well. I definitely think that they're going to get around there and be challenging for a wild card spot, or maybe in the division. Everyone in this division could definitely be finishing around 89-90 range at the end of the season. It'll be pretty fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm with you on the injury thing. They're an injury away from their rotation of really looking bad, especially if it's to one of their top 3. But anyway, that pretty much wraps up for the AL Central. We got one more division, which will come out tomorrow, which will be Saturday, and then we will have the MVP prediction stuff, the World Series prediction, all that good stuff, and the last day on Sunday. So that pretty much does it. Ryan, anything else to say before we head out?
I just want to say thanks for watching, everyone. This AL Central race is going to be a really good one this year. I think it'll be one of the more interesting ones to watch. But obviously tomorrow we're going to be talking about Ian's Red Sox, the defending world champs.
Mm-hmm.
So
I got a lot to say about them. So tune in.
So yeah, definitely tune in tomorrow. But for Ian, I'm Ryan. We will see you tomorrow, Saturday, for the AL East.
Peace, guys.